Trades of the hat for the mic. But no, thank you, Dylan, and thanks everybody for coming this morning. I appreciate you being here a lot. We are excited. I mean, as I'm sure all of you know, I mean, we're excited to make the playoffs, and North Dakota State, we were excited to make the playoffs. Excited that the Drake Bulldogs are going to make the playoffs. I hope Griff makes it to Fargo next Saturday. But we were campaigning on Saturday at the University of Northern Iowa, and I think we lost votes after the NDSU beat up on the Panthers. You guys saw that? Okay, we knocked you and I out of the playoffs. Probably created space for Drake to make the playoffs, so you can thank us, I think, for that game. But anyway, we're here today. It's so fun to talk to a group of college students. It's bringing my memories back from when I was sitting in your chairs, and I just want to say a couple things about that I haven't shared on the campaign trail before with any other group. But when I was in college, the question that I hated the most when I was a senior in high school is, what do you want to do? Have you decided what you want to do? Have you then got to school? What is your major? Have you decided on your major? When I got to North Dakota State undergrad, I found out they had a thing called University Studies, where your freshman year you didn't have to declare a major in one of the, across all the majors in the 6 different colleges, engineering, architecture, and math and sciences, and agriculture, and all these different ones. You didn't have to join a college, you didn't have to declare a major. So I jumped in University Studies. Midway through my junior year, they tracked me down and they said, hey, you haven't left University Studies. That was designed for freshmen, and you were supposed to pick the beginning of your sophomore year. I need to pick something. And by that time, I had taken classes across every college on campus, just trying to find the best professors and what was interesting. So I went into a negotiation with the university about remaining undecided through the time that I was going to graduate. And the negotiation came up with is if I did a paper that explained how all the different disparate classes that I'd taken somehow tied together into one thing, and if I did that paper, and then if I would tell them these are the classes I was going to take the rest of my junior year and my senior year, and then I actually took those classes that it kind of made sense into a whole, then I would have I get a degree, Bachelor of University Studies degree. Which, so it wasn't a BA or a BS, it was a BUS. So it was like, get on the bus. It was kind of the theme for that. So anyway, I did that, and they still have that program today, and I had an opportunity to, I was honored at one time getting an honorary doctorate from North Dakota State. I got to be there at graduation to give the speech, and they said, well, we do that. I said, I'll do it if I get to hand the diploma out to the 14 kids out of a couple thousand graduates that year that were graduating in University Studies, because I felt a kinship that this thing is still going on. It's okay to be undecided. It's okay to go through college and sort of be exploring. And I'll tell you another reason why. Because when I was in high school and I grew up in Arthur, North Dakota, there was only one paved road. That was the Highway 18. Every street was gravel in town. There was no computers. So I got to NDSU, and NDSU was not at the time leading edge. So there was a mainframe on campus at a time that mini computers were kind of a thing. It was the pre-PC era, but we were 10 years behind on technology. So yeah, I saw how mainframes worked, literally punch cards. I mean, I got kind of could see what the beginning of the industry was, because it was so far behind on technology. And there wasn't, when I was graduating, you couldn't possibly have understood that there was going to be this giant explosive thing called the PC, the personal computer, and the PC software industry that was going to accompany the company. When I was literally a senior, I could have talked to every advisor on campus. What do you want to do with your life? Do you want to be in a software company? There wasn't a thing. 5 years after I graduated, I was literally betting the farm, 160 acres. My dad was a World War II Navy vet. I had 160 acres that it was mine, so I wasn't betting my sister's or my brother's farmland, but I bet my 160 acres. I took a mortgage on that, which of course you're never supposed to do if your grandparents have homesteaded and it's all paid for. But there's no venture capital, there was no thing. I bet the farm on this startup, and Dylan talked about the outcome, but we started with 10 kids. It took us 18 years to get to that outcome, so we were an overnight success story, but with about 18 years of hard work and 6 near-death experiences, but we grew that company from 10 to 2,000. We had 1,200 people working in Fargo, 400 rest of North America, 400 rest of the world, and had people, we had customers in 132 countries. We had tens of thousands of people working at these partner organizations. We had people around the world that didn't have the right to vote, they didn't have the right to assemble, they didn't have the right to free speech, but they were our customers. They were part of part of our ecosystem. And so when you're a young kid and you get a chance to see that there are people in the world that don't have the rights that all of us often take for granted, America doesn't have to be perfect to be exceptional. And we have an exceptional country with exceptional opportunities. So I had a chance to really understand how the world works and how America fits into that. And that was a powerful experience for me. But my message to all of you today, when we've got technology is changing every job, every company, and every industry, and it has during my lifetime. And that statement has never been more true, and now it's accelerating. Because what's happening with AI is going to affect every job, every company, every industry. It's going to affect how universities work. It's going to affect all knowledge-based industries. I mean, this is a revolution like that we haven't seen, and there's very few people that actually comprehend that. You're going to be the beneficiaries of that explosion of opportunity. So I would tell you right now, when you say, if somebody asks you, some so-called grown-up says, oh, what are you going to do when you graduate? What are they? You might say, well, 5 years from now, I'm going to start a company in an industry that doesn't exist today. Because that's what I could have said, but I didn't know that was coming. Because I was still a senior, like, oh, you're in university studies, haha, you haven't made up your mind, you know what you're going to do. And I'm like, I know, I don't know what I'm going to do. But there seems like there's things happening. Anyway, 5 years later, I was betting the farm on something that did not exist. That opportunity will be even faster. There'll be stuff 2 years from now that doesn't exist today that you guys could find that's what your career is. So, and I would say that, and then the big shift is, you know, and I have to say that this is something that we did with our kids when they were growing up, because at least 20 years ago, once the internet got going and you could see the power of the internet, it was pretty clear that we were headed towards a place where you could look up the answer to any question, anywhere, anytime, on any device. And so then it was, when we were raising our kids, we said, hey, we've got to really focus on a couple things. And Dylan mentioned humility as part of the sort of the charter and the goal, but we said you got to have the humility to understand that what you think may be true, it turns out to not be true. And you have to have the humility to understand you can learn from anyone. If you want to learn about addiction in this country, you can learn as much from someone who's homeless and struggling with addiction and mental health as you can, talking to a PhD. Talk to people with lived experience, and you can learn a lot. So, but you have to have the humility that, you don't have to always be an expert to teach you what you need to know. But so humility is key, because that's the way you keep your there's the old proverb, if the teacup is full, you can't add anything more to it, but if your cup is empty, then you can receive knowledge. So humility helps you do that. But curiosity is probably the biggest tool that your generation is going to need, because it's not who knows the most, it's who can write the best query. Because if your ability to frame questions and tap into all of the world's knowledge is going to be a differentiator. So, and I don't think any campuses are teaching me how to write the best query yet, are they? Are you nodding your head? Yes, they're teaching that? No, they're not yet. Okay, you're agreeing with me they're not doing it yet, but we need to. We need to be able to understand how to utilize the power that is right there in front of you, and it's going to be transformative for you. The other thing which you guys have got to think about is the economic situation in this country. I mean, with the debt situation that we have and the $34 trillion of debt, the interest on that debt's more than our defense budget. And just to help people understand, because trillion, we kind of went in the last few years from billion to trillion, and we just sort of substituted a T for a B and then kept using the same numbers. And it's hard for humans to comprehend that you just added another 1,000 onto that. So take a number and then think of something that's 1,000 times larger. So if I was going to pay, each of you $1 trillion, and I was going to pay you in $1 bills, and it was as fast as a Vegas, blackjack dealer, I could pay you $1 every second. I got a stack of dollar bills, and I'm going to give you $1 trillion. Let's just start giving it to you. One at a time, one bill at a time, one per second, just flying off my hand. It would take me 32,000 years to give you $1 trillion. 32,000 years. $1 billion would be 1,000 times less than that. I mean, it is just crazy how much money is, being printed and blown out here. That's going to affect your generation. And it's not going to be a problem for a little while, because a long time, because between AI and what's happening with biotech, everybody, all of you sitting at these tables, with the exception of our veteran, looks like he might be more my age, but I'm going to say with the folks that are here enrolled right now, you guys are all going to be 100. Social Security is not going to work, if you pay in for 30 and then you try to pay out for 50. The math doesn't work on that. So there's things that have to be changed. But I would just say, why we jumped into the race was because of a number of these things. We said, wow, we were countries headed in the wrong directions on the economy. We're headed in the wrong direction on energy policy. We're headed in the wrong direction on national security. And now we find ourselves in a Cold War with China, proxy war with Iran, and a proxy war with Russia. And that is, affects every single American. And we needed leadership that actually has worked in the private sector. When I look down that debate stage, I've created more jobs than all the other candidates combined, and I've been making payroll since my mid-20s, and when some of these other folks have never created one job. And our customers at Great Plains were small businesses, so we understand all the struggles that families and small business owners go through, that they create over 90% of the jobs in America. If we don't figure out a way to build cities and communities that allow businesses of all sizes to thrive, ones that can't afford lobbyists to go to Washington to break the rules to help, their companies. If we don't do that, we're not going to have the country that we're having the opportunity. So and I also, when I grew up in Arthur, worked on the farm, worked at the ranch, worked at the grain elevator. Dylan mentioned worked as a chimney sweep during college to help pay through college. All those jobs are jobs where you took a shower at the end of the day, not at the beginning of the day. So I understand what working Americans actually do, and how the people of America, like the people in Iowa and in the Midwest that feed the world and fuel the world, I understand what they do. And because my dad was a World War II vet who passed away when I was a freshman in high school, I understand how we have to take care of our veterans. That commitment to them and their families is something that's solemn and that we have to honor. If we want, freedom's not free, and we have to honor our veterans. So with that, I just want to conclude right now to say thank you for all being here. And then this is just meant to be kind of very informal, kind of like I've tried to keep it right now, and just answer your questions and hear your perspectives and your comments about things. But really grateful that you took the time to be here this morning. And I also want to give a shout out to Ashley Johnson, who's shaking her head and saying no. But if you don't know Ashley, you know Ashley. From North Dakota, and I got interviewed by McKinsey from your student paper. She's a Bismarck High demon, but she's back over here. And if you're from Bismarck, you can either be a demon or a saint. I prefer the demons. They tend to have done well in life. So anyway, that's the Bismarck demons are right down the street from like 3 blocks away from the governor's residence. Okay, but with that, we got Ashley's got a mic runner. Ashley's dad, Bruce, was one of those 2,000 team members from a small town that ended up helping build Great Plains Software, which then became the big division of Microsoft and still is. So anyway, Ashley, thanks for all that volunteering and helping you're doing down here, and thanks for being a mic runner. So with that, I would say again, I'm going to just close by saying thank you all for being here. Grateful for your time. You could be someplace else. You're heading into Thanksgiving week. I got one more day of class to go here, but thanks for taking time to be engaged. Your engagement in the political process matters enormously. So give yourselves a hand. Thank you very much. Okay, and then if you question, you can say tell me your first name and maybe where your what hometown or home state you're from. Would be very fun. If you raise your hand, Ashley will come running with a microphone, or she'll come walking fast, walking quickly.
Kendall Zylstra, Larchwood, Iowa, which is pretty close to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. My question pertains to young voters. One of your political opponents introduced a constitutional amendment to raise the voting age to 25. First of all, what do you think about that? And number two, how do you think Republicans should engage young voters?
Well, the first one on raising the voting age is nuts. I mean, that's just crazy. I don't even know where would that come from? I mean, it's like we've got, you're 18, you can serve in the military, right? But you can't vote. I mean, this is something that made no sense to me. And like I said, you're not the leaders of tomorrow. You're actually the leaders of today. And we need more engagement, not less engagement from young people, because all of these bad decisions that are being made by the older generations and career politicians, they're going to be gone, and you're the ones that have to live with it. And so it's like, if you're going to have a weighted thing, you'd be like, give everybody under 25 2 votes. Because these are long-term impacts to you, and they're not long-term impacts to somebody that's got 5 years left in their life that's sitting in the Senate that's making these decisions. So how should we engage voters? This is a challenge of both parties. Both parties have this. Both parties take an issue, they weaponize it, they take a very extreme position, they run to the edge, and guess what? In the era where social media is driving, and online fundraising drives a lot of the fundraising, you get more engagement. I'm just talking social science. You get more, I'm talking business models. I'm not being a pundit, I'm just telling the facts, which maybe you all know. If you can get someone to be angry about something, like, you should be afraid of this, or they either fear it or they're mad about it. Be afraid, send us your money. Be afraid, vote for us. This makes you mad, you should be really mad. This isn't, you can't believe it. So the triggering event of emotion on social media that gets engagement and gets donors and gets whatever, that has accelerated this push to the edge. And it turns out most of the voters in America are not on those edges. We got this thing, which has been called the exhausted majority. It's the 70% that's not the 15% on each end that's screaming and yelling and being a keyboard warrior. Those folks are checking out, and this is very dangerous, because if the majority of the people are not engaged, then we don't end up with solutions to big problems. And I'll present one to you, which is personally affected our family and every family. The First Lady has been very courageous in sharing that she struggled with the disease of addiction for over 2 decades. Now she finds herself in recovery, but the first 15 years of recovery before she became First Lady never talked about it because of shame and stigma. What if people find out about my DUI? What if people find out about my blackout drinking? I'm just going to hide. When it's a brain disease, now she talks about it, and she's now on the board of trustees of Hazel and Betty Ford, and she's been recognized nationally for having the courage to speak up. We have a thing called Recovery Reinvented, which she leads. We had our 7th annual event. We had 3,500 people attend, either in person or online, and it's saving lives and changing lives, because we have to approach the addiction, which is 32 million people in America have the disease of addiction. 15 million kids live in a household where a parent, at least one of the adults, is suffering from the disease of addiction, which probably means they got financial insecurity and trauma associated with all the bad things, because when someone has the disease of addiction, it affects the whole family. So why am I bringing this up to your question about young people? Well, since Joe Biden took office, we've lost 270 million people. And thank you, sir, for serving in Vietnam. We've lost, in the last 2.5 years under Joe Biden, 5 Vietnams worth of casualties. 270,000 Americans have died of a drug overdose in America in the last 2.5 years. 70% of those are fentanyl poisonings, which that fentanyl's coming across the southern border for the most part. But I'd say, so why am I talking about this when you asked about bringing in young people? I think young people also are frustrated by this, the divisiveness and the name calling and all that, because it is, but then you say to yourself, okay, if we're losing 300 people a day to a drug overdose in this country, 300 people a day, and that's, if we had a plane that went down today where 300 people died, you'd all know about it. And if there was one again tomorrow, 300 people died, and one went down on Thanksgiving Day, 300 people go down, you wouldn't be talking about anything else at turkey dinner. You'd be like, nobody's getting on a plane to fly home from the beginning, because this is like such an incredible problem. We've got to all come together and fix it, because on that plane would be Republicans, Independents, and Democrats. Well, guess what? On these deaths every day, it's not. It's rich and poor. It's rural and urban. It's you know, red and blue, it's independent. I mean, it's all that. And so what we need, I mean, I think for young people to get engaged, they would have to say, I'm gonna get involved with a party that actually solves problems. These guys have a solution and they're actually working on it, and they're not just using it as a fundraising tool and a get out the vote tool. You know, so so that's part of why I got into this thing, is I'm not a politician. When I ran, they said, oh, you want to be a politician? I don't want to be a politician. I don't even pay attention to politics. I'm an elected leader who solves problems. And so that's what we need to bring, and I think that's what our country needs right now, because we've got to have a leadership that understands that leadership is about solving problems and bringing people together. It's about understanding that our real enemies are some of these folks overseas that want to destroy our country. And it's not a thing. We have to get back to neighbors helping neighbors, like they did in my hometown. If a farmer got sick, you know, it wasn't like, you know, call the state or call the feds for support. It was like, no, all the other neighbors came out and they helped, they brought their combines and they took the crop off. And nobody had to pass a law or regulation to say you guys have to do that. Everybody has helped each other. So we can get back to all that, because that's happening. It happens every day. You just never hear about it. The best of America is happening every day. It's just never in the news. Neighbors are helping neighbors somewhere in America today, doing great things, including around the disease of addiction. We've toured, you know, a great place in, you know, YSS here in Iowa, and the first lady spoke to, you know, some young women that were there that were struggling in high school like she did with the disease of addiction. It's happening, but it's all too invisible. But certainly when I'm your president, I'll use the bully pulpit to talk every day about the best of America, but we'll also be talking about things that are not actually partisan. Not every issue in America requires a political party. It actually requires teamwork to get it done. But thanks for that great question. Okay, another hand. Got two over here, but sir, tell me your name.
Okay, thank you. My name is Ron Langle, and I'm from Ankeny. I'm actually a farm boy from Templeton, Iowa, and I'm still involved in farming back there. 80 miles west of here, Templeton, right? Anyway, just comments, basically. The other day on our roundtable over coffee, politics, of course, gets brought up. And people are a little bit careful about speaking what they really think, you know, about particular candidates. And a 96-year-old guy who's very, very sharp, yet mentally just sharp as a tack, all of a sudden he said, the silent majority has not yet spoken. Now you just alluded to the idea that 70% of a population are tired of the 15% on the two different fringe ends, the extremists. The extremists are driving me, and I suppose a lot of other people, crazy. And I like that you bring that up, and I think it's a message that has to be heard, you know, more and more often now. You brought up the veteran suicide thing. A few years ago, because I'm a Vietnam vet, the highest rate of suicides was the Vietnam veteran, and he was over 70 years old. And I will tell you from my own personal experiences, when life slows down, the family's raised, you're not working as hard as you used to at your job, the house gets empty, and that's when all of those thoughts that you repress come to the surface of the mind, and then that's when the suicides occur. And so we have to remember those veterans as they progress through life, you know, as they're busy. They're just running ahead of the storm all the time, running ahead of it, and eventually the storm catches up. That's the issue with veterans. So I just wanted to state that. Another one is, a thought that I had is, please don't drop out, you know. I have seen too many times that the dark horse candidate in the beginning somewhat becomes the racehorse as the primaries move across the United States. You know, they pick up momentum, they pick up steam, and I'm really hoping for you, you know, that's what it's going to be for you.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that. And join me, thank you for your service. Appreciate it. 22 veterans a day are completing suicide. So this issue that was just mentioned is a tragic one. And as the, you know, one of the great honors of being governor is the opportunity to be the commander-in-chief of the North Dakota National Guard. We got such a great group of people, and they've been involved in fighting the war on terror. They've been down helping on the border, but we've had troops deployed almost continuously for the first 20 years of the war on terror, from not even from 9/11, USS Cole, we had troops that were deployed. And we've lost more people from that era to completed suicides than we did actually lose in combat. And that's, you know, and I've met with the parents of those folks, and it's just, it's one thing to lose a child in combat, that's a tragedy, but you know, they're considered a hero, their name goes on the wall, and they're a gold star parent, and then kid comes home, serves, does all that stuff, completes suicide, and we don't call them gold star parents, but they lost a child too, and they absolutely lost them from those invisible wounds. And so we have to think differently about how we're supporting those families when they come home at all ages through there. But so great points, and I do appreciate the encouragement about staying in. That's our full intention to do that. We're going to be on the ballot, Iowa and New Hampshire. We're going to be there, and this is important because you know the RNC. If I was going to get political, the RNC, their job, their charter is to help elect candidates in November of 2024. You read the bylaws, you read the mandates. There's nothing in their bylaws that says their job is to narrow the field 2 months before people in Iowa get to even caucus, and yet that's what they're doing this year. And part of the reason we're staying in is because for the Theodore Roosevelt, who we're building a presidential library for in North Dakota at the entrance to the Theodore Roosevelt National Park, he fought over 100 years ago to get the primary process created. There's a great book out, if any of you are studying political science, called Let the People Rule. Talks about that effort, because prior to that, it was the party bosses go back in a smoke-filled room, they would pick the candidates, they'd do it in conjunction with the big media. In those days, it was powerful newspaper organizations. They would select the candidates. Voters didn't get to pick who the candidates were. The candidates were already decided in both parties in a back room. And now we've got a presidential primary that puts the power in places like Iowa, which to narrow the field, places like New Hampshire to do that. It's power to the people, where people like you can come out and meet candidates multiple times, look in the eye, take a measure of them and their character and their integrity, and not just see a TV ad or something on social media. You actually get to do what we're doing right now, which is why I applaud you all for being here. But that power is being taken away because there's an active effort to try to narrow the field with these debate rules to try to get it. Were they trying to get it down to one before people, so people in Iowa have one person to vote for, two? Who knows? But competition's good for colleges, it's good for college athletics, it's good for the Republican Party, it's good for business, and so that's why we're in here fighting. And the math has shown that the dark horse can sprint to the front. That's happened many times, including here in Iowa. So we're just out doing this every day, and grateful that we've got someone with your experience, sir, that recognizes that and giving that encouragement. That means a ton to us, so thank you. We had some other questions over here, I think. Hands up.
Hello, my name is Elite Nilsson. I'm from Oskaloosa, Iowa, a town about an hour away. I kind of want to go back to that first question and ask about your strategy for navigating social media, how you're planning to utilize that, and then kind of on that flip side, how you're planning to counteract social media's kind of inherent nature of perpetuating political misinformation.
Well, this is a challenge not just for any campaign, it's a challenge for the country. Because one of the hallmarks of our nation is free speech, and free speech is protected, and it's critical to what we do to a free and open society. But we have all kinds of risks associated with that. And say for example, slip into energy here. How is Putin able to invade Ukraine? He's able to invade Ukraine because he had all of Western Europe dependent on his energy. How did he get all of Western Europe dependent on his energy? Well, there's been all these, protests against fossil fuels driven by, claims around, environmental claims and CO2. And so that's, pervasive. So you get entire countries, Germany, like we're going to shut down all of our thermal base load. The UK, we're going to stop doing offshore drilling. And all of it driven by what people are reading on social media. Well, I knew it when I was in the private sector. When we were a small company, We were selling in the US and Canada. The next country we're going to add was Australia. It was 1989. I'm a kid. You know, go to Australia. On the way back, I'm going to swing through China. Go to China. And they say, oh, they're selling US software in a street market. I go, great. I thought they'd go and I'd see, on early programs, like IBM stuff or Lotus 123, which is before Excel was around. I go there and said, just a joke, do you have a great plane? Scout right over here. They were selling our software on a 5.25-inch floppy like for $1, $25,000 of software when we weren't even selling outside the US. They were already pirating. China was pirating everything. That's 34 years ago. So I didn't wake up after I became a presidential candidate and said, oh, we got a problem, we're in Cold War with China. No, we've been under cyber attack from China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea nonstop. I knew that in the private sector. I got into the state government and saw we had no cyber protection basically at the state level, and North Korea even trying to get into information about the missiles that we have in North Dakota. So and when I say active, there are people that get up that are paid to go to work by those governments to attack our cities, our tribes, our school districts, our universities, and they're going after, in the case of China, they're usually going after research information and technology information. In the case of North Korea is, we've caught them. They're trying to do ransomware against entities in North Dakota because they want, we're going to destroy all your records if you don't pay us. It becomes hard cash for a country like that doesn't have much export. So that's happening. So we know that's happening. We also know that 40% of most of the accounts on any of these social media things are all bots. And so if I'm Putin, which is not like being president of a country, if I'm Putin and I'm a mob boss and I've killed my enemies on a bridge in Moscow and I've poisoned them in London and now I've blown up a plane full of them, Prigozhin and his buddies, so I could take over the 65 shell companies that were part of the Wagner group, which control things like, gold mines in Africa, and they get 25% of the revenue off. They went to help out Syria militarily, and now they get 25% of the Syrian oil revenue goes back to Russia, aka back to Putin, not to the treasury. So, he's like I said, he's worth like $100 billion. He's a super wealthy mob boss that, kills his enemies in broad daylight. So then you're saying, okay, during all this time when Germany was eliminating all of their fuel that would have been a competitive source to Russia, what do you think the probability is that of those 40% of those accounts were Russian bot accounts that were basically promoting a whole thing of the way we save the planet is, get rid of fossil fuel energy? I think it's 100%, because they've had misinformation campaigns going on all over the world. So if it's economically in your interest to get everybody else to shut it down so you can be the sole supplier, that's what was happening. And then when he invaded Ukraine, the price of oil went up and he made even more money. And now he's become China's discount gas station. And again, which is super infuriating, is that this summer, the Biden administration tacitly released the oil sanctions on Iran. Their exports are up over 1 million barrels a day. That's all going to China. And then 2 weeks ago, when nobody's paying attention, Biden released the oil sanctions on Venezuela. Now they can export 800,000 barrels a day to put back into the market heading towards China. China's rebuilding their strategic petroleum reserve. At the same time, Biden reduced ours in half for political purposes. It's called the Strategic Petroleum Reserve because it's there for when we get to World War III. It's not there to help get the price down at the pump ahead of the midterms, is what he used it for. And of course, so what I said earlier, economy, energy, national security, they're all three completely interrelated. And you asked a question about social media. Well, social media is not just about who you're going to vote for in the next election. Social media is being used by foreign entities in America, in Western Europe, to influence policies which benefit their economies. We're in a competition with them. Of course they're going to try to say, oh, you guys go save the planet, but meanwhile we'll supply all the energy and get rich doing it. And then that gives them the power to do things like, oh, we're just going to go into Ukraine. And guess what Ukraine had? They had a bunch of food. So it's like, and guess who needs food? China. China has to import food. Guess who needs energy? China. The world's largest importer of oil and gas is China. 10 million barrels of oil a day. There's a reason why Xi and Putin have met 40 times. There's a reason why China is involved in Venezuela. There's a reason why China supports Iran. They need their oil and gas, and we don't even get the picture. We're too busy trying to shut down the U.S. energy industry here with some crazy idea that if we shut down U.S. energy and the Biden administration, and I would say there's a generationally more people under age 30 believe that that is like essential, that that's the existential crisis, is shutting down the U.S. energy industry, when if you really cared about the environment and global environment, you would be protesting any time that the energy's not made in the U.S., because the U.S. does it cleaner, safer, smarter. We've actually got an EPA. Venezuela does it. Russia does it. Iran does it. I mean, if you displace energy on a global market, it's a global market. You shut down supply coming from the U.S., you don't have one impact on demand. Demand is increasing. So you don't affect demand, you just affect the clean supply, and it gets replaced by the dirty supply. And so if we have to be smart about this thing, about how it's being used. That's one of the things that's destabilizing the world, hurting our economy, helping our adversaries, and it's all driven, in a big chunk of that's being driven by a social media campaign, which then is being picked up around the world. That the way to save the planet is to shut down the U.S. energy industry. That is just false. It's actually helping the other folks. So then that's a big example. But then in these smaller examples, yes, there's misinformation all the time. It's a challenge for your generation, and with AI, it's going to get even worse, because with the deep fake capability and voices and images, it's going to be very hard for people to know what's real or not real going forward. So these aren't easy answers, but the idea that somehow the government is going to regulate it, if there's people calling for regulation of AI right now, I actually feel that most of if it's on social media and they're calling for it, that is also coming from Russia and China, because China is behind us in AI. And they, of course, want us to slow down. 6 months ago, there was a bunch of, we should stop all development of AI in the U.S. Well, whose idea was that? Of course, that's our competitors, because they know that if we are smart enough to be able to utilize it, it can help us gain a competitive advantage in every industry. So it's a challenging time. We need smart young people like you that can discern that. And that's why I said at the beginning, stay humble, stay curious, because part of humility is because some days you're going to wake up and go, I used to think that was true. Pick a topic, about the environment or about this or that. I used to think that was all true. It turns out, it wasn't true. You have to have the humility to let go of some things, and then have the curiosity to say, what's the actual answer? But thank you, great question. Okay, maybe take one more and then we'll, instead of me answering 4 questions, why don't I let you guys all ask your questions, and then, because I want to hear the questions, and then we can wrap it up and talk some more. So just ask your question, and then we'll hand the mic to the next questioner.
Sounds good. My name is Evelyn Parker. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. And I guess my question is something you've kind of been alluding to in a lot of your answers, but I'd like to hear kind of more directly from you. It's just, what is your opinion on the state of the Republican Party as it exists right now? And kind of what is your plan as a Republican candidate to sort of rectify a lot of the errors or mistakes that have been made by your party in the past? And how are you going to be kind of a unifying force for the divisiveness that exists in your party and also just as a whole?
That was great. 4 questions. That was great. All good.
My name is Jake. I'm from Houston, Texas, and my question is sort of going back to what you were talking about with energy. You mentioned, one, that the decisions we're making now politically are going to affect especially our generation for the long-term future. And so with that energy independence that we're talking about and having American-made energy, what role do you see green and renewable energy being, and how soon do you see that becoming a major part alongside our fossil fuels as that phases out in the future?
DuPont. Curious how you're planning to get your lofty goals accomplished.
Get my...
Your goals.
Oh, okay.
I'm a little curious to see how you're going to manage to do this. I got one other question. Are you prepared for the den of vipers and utter depravity that Washington, D.C. has become?
That's a yes or no question. Yes.
It is.
You mentioned about social media, like 40% of people are bots. Is that right? What do you think of the thing Nikki Haley mentioned a couple days ago about people verifying with names on social media?
That's a quick answer, which is that's direct violation of First Amendment free speech, and so that's not gonna fly.
Hey, I'm Lily from Upland Park, Pennsylvania, and my question is related a lot to yours. A lot of American infrastructure is about 70 years old or even older. How do you plan to address that, along with climate change and how that's going to impact American infrastructure? Do you plan to address how a lot of American infrastructure is also entirely car-based? Thank you.
Okay. Good stuff. That's a good thing, and I'll wrap it all into one kind of closing thing. But let me start with the Republican Party piece. The Republican Party's got big challenges because we very little interest in people age 30 or below. Strongest membership is people that are aging. That means, even from 2016 to 2024, between those two elections, a lot of people that voted Republican, sadly, are no longer with us. They've passed away. So if you, as a party, if you don't have a way to engage young people to get in and provide the energy and the votes to do that, then that's a problem. You know what is a savior right now is demographically is people over age 65 have a much higher propensity to vote. People under age 30 don't vote as much. There's all this underutilized power among your generation because people just don't vote. I mean, that's crazy. But it's for Republicans, they're probably like, hey, that's great because they think they're not going to vote Republican. But the real issue is not Republican or Democrat. You talk about what's wrong with both parties. Take a state like New Hampshire. You can register, there's three basic ways. You're Republican, you're Democrat, or you independent. The largest party in New Hampshire is independents. The other parties are shrinking. This thing we talked about on the 15% on the edge, those are getting, more and more people are getting disgusted, and they're saying, I'm leaving my party, I'm just going to be an independent. I'm going to vote for the person, not for the party. Because if the parties are about divisiveness and fundraising and getting out the vote on certain trigger issues, but they're not about solving problems, then people are voting with their feet and they're saying, I'm leaving each party and I'm just going to be part of this group of independents. Which then, then people say, oh, well, isn't this the year where you're going to have a third-party candidate that somehow, step into the breach and make it on? It's an interesting thing. Mathematically, it's not going to work next year in 2024, and it's not going to work for ballot access and a bunch of things. But your generation probably should be thinking about what is the function of political parties, and is this system really working? Because both parties better get better at actually solving problems. Now, how do we know about this 70% in the middle? Well, when we got elected, we were running as an outsider in 2016. We were down 59 points in the poll with 5.5 months to go to the primary when we entered the race. And people came and said, you should drop out, don't run, not your turn. The person we're competing with had 100% name recognition, had been in politics for 40 years. We ran and we won by 40 points. 20 points in the primary, 40 in the general election. 16 was a good year for outsiders. In 2020, some of those outsiders didn't fare so well. We got re-elected by 40 points. How do you get re-elected by 40 points? You win 70-30. How do you win 70-30? You get the 70 people, the 70%, the huge majority, and then you got people screaming at you from both edges because you're like, oh, you're not as divisive as us. But that's the way you do it, and it's great to win by 40 points because it means you've got the majority of people. So that's part of where I think the solution is that we've got to be better at actually solving problems that matter to the most number of people, and we have to show that young people that that we're for something as opposed to just get something. And for Republicans, it needs to be about freedom, liberty, and limited government. And the party gets confused about that sometimes. The energy pieces that I want to wrap in here related to energy transitions is if you look at the globe and the demand for population and worldwide, we have like 1 billion people on the planet that got up this morning and lived in a place where there's no electricity. I mean, imagine, think about how we fare when we got a power outage for 2 hours or 4 hours or a bad storm for 24 hours. But think about your life growing up where there's no electricity in your life, and that affects everything: education, health, longevity, family size, all that stuff. So there's going to be a demand. So between now and 2050, when we talk about energy transitions, that's kind of the U.S. view of it, because we're a country where essentially everybody's got electricity, everybody's got access to transportation. So how do we transition? For the rest of the world, it's energy addition. We need more energy to be able to increase the health and the welfare of everybody else. And why we say, why does America care about that? Well, we care about it because we're humans. We care about it because they're customers. When the rest of the world is safe and prosperous, the U.S. benefits having the world's largest economy because we provide a lot goods and the work that we've done, establishing free markets and U.S. technology has lifted 1 billion people out of poverty in the world in the last 25 years. That's never happened in the history of mankind, where the world has actually become safer and healthier and more economically resilient because of the leadership of the United States. But you probably don't hear about that much, but that's actually happened. So then if you say we're going to have increasing demand, then we have to do all the above. We've got to have increases in all of these sources, but the idea that somehow where today close to 80% of the energy in the world comes from fossil fuels, getting the 80% down to zero and replacing it, and then growing the top line, it doesn't work. I mean, it would bankrupt the planet. There's not enough money, there's not enough resource, there's not enough rare earth minerals to create the batteries, there's not enough factories to make windmill blades, and then where do you dispose of the windmill blades, where do you get rid of the batteries, and all the recycling stuff that no one's figured out. But what we can do is do what we're in North Dakota, which is we can decarbonize liquid fuels. And we're doing it, and Iowa's going to play a big role in that, because you can take the easiest fuel that you can decarbonize in the world is ethanol. When you cook corn and take that corn, it's like a 1930s bootlegger still. When you cook it, you get alcohol, aka ethanol, and it's a great fuel. I mean, NASCARs run all their races on ethanol. You can run a car on 85% ethanol. I mean, it is like a great high-powered fuel. The CO2 that comes off of that as the other byproduct can be captured. It can be used for carbonating beverages. It can be used for, for enhanced oil recovery. And in North Dakota, we're doing that. We've got we have two now permitted and operating ethanol plants that are capturing the CO2 and they're sequestering it, storing it safely underground permanently. We've got another group that's taking CO2 off of and I'm focusing on CO2 because that's the thing that people have identified as the problem. So you say, okay, it's not that fossil fuels are the problem, it's the CO2. So that's with innovation, you wouldn't try to kill the whole product. You'd say, how do we fix the issue related to the CO2? So take all the CO2 off of a gas plant in Wyoming, build a pipeline 105 miles through Montana into North Dakota. They inject that CO2 into the ground into some 1980s oil wells that have a depletion curve where they were producing about 20% of what they used to. By injecting the CO2, they're back up to about 90% of original production, and the CO2 stays in the ground, and there's 500 pounds more per CO2 staying in the ground than gets produced by that barrel that's produced. So that company is net negative. They have a net negative barrel of oil. They're greener than Patagonia. Okay, and everybody's like, oh, I'm going to buy from this green company. Well, using the same math, the same formula, we now have a oil company that's greener than Patagonia. So you take decarbonized gasoline, you take decarbonized ethanol, and all of a sudden, guess what? All of this math that says we should take all of your taxpayer dollars and subsidize at $7,500 per car an EV over an internal combustion engine because it was going to be cleaner. But the math to do that, you had to drive that EV like 170,000 miles, and then they didn't count in the fact that what do you have to do for the battery disposal at the end. They didn't count in the fact that China's got 85% of the rare earth minerals, and that China's building those batteries in power plants, in plants where they're building the batteries and building the solar panels. They're all powered by coal. China has no oil and gas. They import that 10 million barrels of oil. They are hustling to have all EV cars, not because they care about the environment, but because they don't have oil and gas. I mean, the Washington Post wrote an article a couple of weeks ago, if you read it, praising China for they're accelerating their change to EVs faster than the US, aren't they great? Never mentioned the energy source. Every EV in China is run by coal, powered by coal, should be the bumper sticker on every one of those EVs. And these are 1980 coal plants they're building, not 2023 ones like we have in North Dakota, where we can actually decarbonize the baseload, because we've taken everything out of it so you can have a clean thermal baseload, which we need, because 40% of the electricity in America is still coming from thermal baseload. We can decarbonize that. So it is innovation, not regulation, is the answer to all of this. And I just want to say, for your generation, you've got to be critically thinking, because I feel like you've all been sold this idea that somehow that saving the planet, by being opposed to certain industries, when the people that are lobbyists are doing that are getting subsidies and all of these things that are allowing them to enrich themselves on a path that is actually empowering our adversary, China, because China doesn't have the rare earth minerals all within China. they, through their Belt and Road Initiative, they're tearing up Indonesia, they're tearing up Africa, and there's a reason why they call them rare earth minerals. They call them rare earth minerals because they're measured in parts per million. Parts per million. So you have to move sometimes 1 million pounds of earth to get what you need. There's certain minerals you have to move 100,000 pounds of material from a mining operation to get enough material to make one battery, which is then made in China in a plant like coal, sent to the US, and going into a car, which then we're subsidizing with taxpayer dollars to save the planet. When you could have today, made in America, decarbonized internal combustion machine. So I just say liquid fuels, that's Team USA. EV right now, that's Team China. Until that changes, because guess what? We do have rare earth minerals in our country, but you can't get out. There's 240 million acres of land that Theodore Roosevelt put away for all of you. He put it away and said that is for the benefit and the use of the American people for generations to come. Under the Biden administration, guess what? You can't mine rare earth minerals, you can't develop oil and gas, you can't really cut a tree. I mean, they're basically saying all of this stuff is supposed to be preserved as opposed to conserved. Conservation means sustainable use. Preservation means nobody sets foot on it. And whether it's taking places that are high in uranium and turning them into national monuments, you know, when that's happened, now we're importing uranium into our country to run from Russia to run our 93 nuclear plants that we're providing baseload electricity, which, by the way, nuclear is another part of the solution for the future, because nuclear has never, no one has ever died in America from a nuclear accident related to a power plant. Never, nobody, ever. And we kill, you know, and I had somebody ask me, would you live next to a nuclear plant? And I said, yes. Would you live there with your family? I said, yes. You're kidding. Why would you do that? And I said, well, when I was raising them on farm in North Dakota, we lived next to a road. And they said, well, what does that have to do with it? I said, well, we kill 45,000 people a year on roads, and I let my kids drive on those roads, and we drove on those roads. And so, you know, getting in your car is way more dangerous than living next to a nuclear plant. I mean, more people die of shark bites in this country, and more people have shark attacks, and more people have actually died getting mad at vending machines and then falling over on them than they have, you know, from a nuclear thing. So that is a solution, but not if we have to get our uranium from Russia, because we can't mine it here. So some of it comes back to land use policy, and it just comes back to common sense to be able to manage all that. And then, sir, for your question, I'll close when you said, hey, you know, what about those policies? They do. I mean, it's pretty simple. On the economy, you actually have to have someone in charge who's actually cut government spending. When I say I cut government spending by 27%,
I'm familiar with your record.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't like we slowed growth from 10% to 8%. We actually reduced it from here to 27% below. And we can do the same thing in the federal government. Part of that is getting the federal government. Federal government does a bunch of stuff that's not their job. Either stop doing it or return it to the states. I mean, just get the federal government back in line with what the constitutional responsibilities they have. That's the fastest thing we can do. If we do that, then the interest rates are going to come down. And then when we start cutting red tape, like we've done in North Dakota, let's say innovation, not regulation, sell energy to our friends and allies versus buy it from our adversaries. These are all straightforward things you can start on day one, and all of that is going to send the economy in a completely different direction. It's being choked right now by inflation and regulation, and it's being choked because of our energy policies, which are enabling foreign dictators and supporting China and hurting U.S. and U.S. manufacturing jobs. So with that, I'm going to just say thank you for being here. We'll stick around. Happy to talk to people one-on-one. Happy to get some pictures if anybody wants that. But again, want to thank Drake University. I want to thank all of you for coming here and spending time this afternoon. I want to thank Ashley and all of the hosts here. Dylan, thank you for all what you do, and appreciate everybody being here. And again, I would say good luck. Have a happy Thanksgiving, and good luck to Drake next Saturday against the Bison, but not too much luck. But okay, thank you.